Welcome to day one of Kingdom Quest. Today's true story from the Bible is one that you might know quite well, but it might come as a surprise that we're doing it in the middle of summer because we have Mary and Joseph, we have angels and shepherds. So it might be one you think you know, but you might not know all the details. And if you've got one of the packs or a Bible, you can follow what I'm saying by reading Luke's book. It's chapter 2, this is the Bible I'm going to be using. Chapter 2 of Luke's little book about Jesus. And he starts with, at that time, Augustus Caesar. So he starts by telling us that this happened when Augustus was the Caesar, the Roman emperor, over the whole of the Roman Empire. He was in charge. And he decided that he wanted everyone to be counted. So probably so that he could ask them for tax. So that meant that Joseph and his pregnant fiancée Mary had to go on a long journey to a place called Bethlehem. And when they got there, it was all very busy. They couldn't find anywhere properly for themselves to stay. And then Mary had her baby. So when she had the baby, she didn't have anywhere to put the baby either. So she wrapped him up tightly and put him in a feeding trough that was normally used for animals' food. So that's Joseph and Mary, an insignificant couple from an insignificant place at the edge of the empire. But we know about them today, even though that happened 2,000 years ago, because the baby that Mary gave birth to turned out to be really someone really special with an important job to do. And we find out more about that job from what happened next in the story, when the scene switches to the hills just above Bethlehem. And out on those hills were shepherds looking after their sheep, as they did every night. But tonight was a bit different because an angel turned up. And the angel, this might be the second surprising thing, the angel was terrifying. So the first thing the angel says is, don't be afraid. And that's quite often what angels say in the Bible. Because you might be surprised, firstly, that angels are real. But then you might also be surprised they're quite so scary. But everyone who meets them ends up a gibbering wreck. So don't be afraid, said the angel. Because angels always come to bring a message. That's their job. They're like God's postman. They bring God's message to people. When there's a special thing happening, God sends an angel to tell people what he wants them to know. And this angel had been sent to surprising people, though, for this message, because shepherds weren't the people you'd choose. They weren't nice, religious, respectable people. They lived in the hills. They lived with the sheep. They slept with the sheep. So they were smelly. They had a reputation for stealing. They were unreliable, smelly people, and quite tough. They weren't respectable religious people, but God chose these surprising people, these shepherds, as the people who were going to hear first the message about the baby, the good news. And I'm going to read that from here to make sure I get it right. So what the angel said was, don't be afraid. I am bringing you some good news. It will be a joy to all the people. Today your Saviour was born in David's town. He is Christ the Lord. This is how you will know him. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a feeding box. So what's the message from the angel? What's the great news that will be a joy to all people? The baby that's just been born to Mary, the angel says, is the Saviour. The Saviour of those shepherds. The Saviour of anyone who puts their trust in him. He's a rescuer. And as well as a rescuer, he's a ruler. He's the Christ. He's the King that was promised. And they'll know who he is because he's in his feeding trough. He'll be the baby. When they look, he'll be the only baby that's lying in an animal's feeding trough. So that's the message. The long-awaited rescuer has come, the King that God promised. And they'll know who he is because he hasn't even got anywhere proper to sleep. So he's in an animal feeding trough, not in a baby's cot, wrapped up tight. And that's the message that God chose to tell the shepherds. He's bringing peace. And it's such good news that the whole crowd of other angels appear as well and sing God's praises and cheer about it, which is quite something. So when the angels have gone, the shepherds say to each other, well, we'd better go and check this out. And they go down to Bethlehem. They find the baby, as promised, lying in the feeding trough, just as God said that they would. And once they've seen for themselves and they've checked out the message, they tell everyone else what the angels said, what the message is, how God's treated them. And everyone else is just as surprised as they were. It's such surprising good news. The baby is a saviour. The baby is a rescuer. He'd come to rescue, to rule, and to bring peace. And everyone was amazed by that great news, including the shepherds. It was quite a night for them. They went back to their sheep, praising God, thanking Him for everything that they'd seen, remembering the angels, the message, that they'd seen the baby, most of all, that God had sent the rescuer that He'd promised, and that He'd chosen them to be the very first people to spread that news. Just how this baby, born to insignificant people in a faraway place, at the edge of the empire, would turn out to be quite so important, how He would rescue, how He would be a king when He's just in His feeding trough, we'll see through the rest of the week. So keep watching.